Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Transformers video. This is going to be my review, my thoughts on Transformers War for Cybertron Trilogy Kingdom. So this is the third of 3 seasons of the trilogy here for War for Cybertron, the Netflix Transformers show. I've reviewed both Siege and Earthrise as they came out, so let's finish off this, given that Transformers is something I've covered on my channel in the past, and I am still a big fan of Transformers. Obviously, you'll know that my general thoughts on the first 2 seasons are basically that, like, there's glimmers of good things, but overall, it's just a bit messy. Nothing is getting the time or the development. The voice acting hasn't been particularly strong, and it just is nothing more than sort of a slight glimpse as to sort of what could have been if this was done a little bit differently. And with Kingdom, I feel ultimately the exact same way. It's just sort of on a bigger scale, in the sense that this is the big finale, so much happens. Everything is thrown at this last season. But again, nothing gets a chance to breathe. They'll do this really big moment, and they've been setting up to this for a while, and then they're straight on to the next thing, and that moment did not have a chance to actually hit, because we have to do the next thing. Because guess what? Having only 6 episodes to do your full season of a final arc here doesn't work. And it's so telling that within your 6 episodes, you can't even, resolve everything, and you have to leave your final piece of content on a cliffhanger. It just, to me, in that sense of it feeling like a sort of completed show, didn't work. And so many of the kind of character arcs we're maybe waiting to see how they come to an end. Optimus, Megatron, they tried, but they didn't work. And we'll get into some of the specifics, I suppose, as we go on, but I just felt like this was very similar to the previous season with regards to they touched on so many Transformers like concepts. So we get introduced to the Beast Transformers, basically a lot of the Beast Wars characters here. And so the cast effectively like doubles in size. Now, admittedly, we had a lot of new characters last season as well, but we kind of killed them off or got past them, whatever. We effectively doubled the number of like main characters in the show with this season, because you have to introduce us to Optimus Primal. You have to introduce us to the second Megatron. And here's Dinobot, here's Black Arachnian, all these other supporting characters who are your sort of like Hound equivalents, but from the Beast Wars cast. And it's just like, this show, with how few episodes it has and how quickly it does things, it does not have the time to do all of this stuff. And they try, they certainly try, and again, some of the concepts that they hit on here are actually quite interesting with regards to, like, I think the time travel dynamic was interesting, but in execution, the big reveal moments I don't think hit as hard as they probably should have, because you'd basically already told us that Optimus, if he goes down the wrong path, is going to become Nemesis, and that Galvatron is Megatron. Everyone knows that. So those moments when they sort of get revealed here, it's kind of cool, but Galvatron and Nemesis becoming the sort of villains of this kind of right at the end, it's so like quick and brief that they just come in, and effectively there's just that final episode left to really deal with them. And then obviously we can't fully deal with them because they're sort of the heralds of Unicron here, and we're not really doing anything with Unicron, and they just sort of hand wave Unicron away with like, well, time travel has opened up the door to, like, I'll start again. And it's like, okay, I get it, we're not going to cover it here in this iteration, but like theoretically, the next iteration of Unicron could be this very same Unicron, just trying again in a different timeline of Transformers. I get it. So there was that. As far as characters go, like, I actually felt that the Beast characters in general stood out a little bit more than most of our previous cast. And I suppose that's just the advancements of the writers as they went through each season. That we went in the first season, and the best you could say is sort of like Elita, Jetfire kind of had a bit of an arc, and they were kind of cool. There was potential with Optimus and Megatron, but they didn't really go anywhere. Here, at least, I thought like Air Razor was actually quite fun. Black Arachnia played her role quite well. Dinobot, they obviously tried to do the same arc, I think, from Beast Wars, but very rushed. But it's still, he stood out at least a little bit. So you definitely give them a little bit of praise there. But again, you had to add like double the amount of characters, and already we were stretched to the absolute limit. Because when we eventually got down to it, like, ultimately what the series was trying to do was tell the story of Optimus and Megatron, the end of the war, and how his Cybertron sort of saved going forward. And the big plot point that really sets all of this off was, of course, from the opening season, Siege, that Optimus ejects basically the Allspark off of the planet. And the show then proceeds to basically just barrage you with the idea of, I can't believe you did that, Optimus. You sent the Allspark off Cybertron. What have you done? What have you done? What have you done? And that's all it's been. It's been Optimus doubting himself. We have not seen our sort of really classic, go-to leader Optimus all season because of the doubts about, is he a good leader or is he not? Has he done the right thing? What are we fighting for? Megatron, of course, you've played a bit on the idea of just how dark of a path is he going down. There's been moments where we've seen him maybe have a glimmer of hope, like last season, but then he always takes the darker path. And when we come down to it in this season, what they eventually get towards is, okay, Optimus takes more abuse from the Maximals, especially Optimus Primal, but ultimately sort of proves himself as the true Prime through a few kind of moments. The whole like Allspark vision thing, its defense system, and then when they get inside, and the ultimate like solution to all of this is that like kind of what they were trying to do in the first season of like some of them feeling that like, no, the war needs to end as soon as possible, and trying to present the idea that it's not just about sort of why they're fighting, but part of it is that Optimus and Megatron, they've made it so personal that the fight is almost more about their feud rather than what's actually going on in the background. The problem is that I don't think they ever fully established why the war started in the first place well enough in Siege. Yes, if you are a Transformers fan, you probably understand why it happened just through sort of context, but I don't think Siege did enough groundwork to give you any foundation to really understand why necessarily, specifically, it was happening here. There were a few moments where they mentioned stuff like sort of functionalism with like Impactor and Mirage in like the first season, but I don't think that was enough to fully clarify the whole situation. And so they like alluded to like, oh, Megatron a few times mentions his gladiatorial stuff, that like he used to be a miner and so on. Optimus, they didn't really touch much on his backstory at all, apart from, I think, Elita here calls him Orion at one point. But what they do is they basically have the vision of Elita channeled through the Allspark tell Optimus that effectively, you need to sort of stop the fighting. That's the way to go forward, that this perpetual war will just continue. Someone has to stop it, and it should be you. And so Megatron and Optimus are about to have their big fight again, but Optimus just hands over the Matrix after he's just got it back. And the solution to this is effectively that, oh, Optimus is now confident in himself as the Matrix bearer that he gives it to Megatron, knowing that he is not worthy of it. Megatron runs into the center of the sort of Allspark temple and basically is rejected. So Optimus basically gets the Matrix back straight away and gets this massive victory over Megatron just because he sort of has confidence in himself. I think that as a concept is interesting. But again, I think in the moment it didn't really work because it was like Optimus making this grand thing, and then Megatron just comes across as so like petty almost that he's just like yoink, runs into the thing, has like a 2-second vision where he falls through the floor and loses the Matrix. And I was like, what? And I get it, like he is the villain, he has to have this moment of downfall to eventually lead to him finally having that awakening and realizing that he has to side with everyone else and make the decision for the future of Cybertron rather than like his own goals. And you can say that kind of worked, but it also, didn't really get the time or development attention that it really needed. Again, they touched on some nice concepts with like Starscream gets hold of the golden disc and basically has his own communication with Unicron. This is also where he discovers the truth that Megatron becomes Galvatron in the future, and I suppose that Optimus becomes Nemesis. And that was actually kind of well done in that right towards the end, like the last 2-3 episodes, they actually turned Starscream in this iteration into a kind of interesting character, because you had sort of Dinobot say something kind of quite interesting to him of just like, you've just kind of accepted being abused by Megatron all this time, like kind of when will you learn? And here he sort of has a moment of strength in terms of standing up to Megatron heavily, revealing the truth to him. And it actually hitting home because Megatron is ultimately all about fighting for his freedom, and that's always the irony of his transformation into Galvatron, is that he becomes a servant of Unicron. And of course this future is something he absolutely hates. He doesn't want to become that because of the character that he is now as like the sort of freedom fighter of Megatron. And that's always an interesting concept. But again, when we eventually get down to it, it's like Galvatron and Nemesis come into play. They are the villains. They're trying to like convince Megatron to give them the Allspark so that they can change like their future, rather than use the Allspark here in the present, which wouldn't affect sort of their timeline, but would stop this timeline from becoming that one in a way. Again, some of the time travel stuff they could have gone into a little bit more. I get what they were going for. Again, an interesting concept, but the execution of it, not particularly great. That's the definition of Kingdom in my mind, is just so many of these things are cool Transformer ideas that if done well, if given the time, if given a few episodes to develop, build up, execute, and then have an aftermath, could have been really well done. I suppose a big example of that would be the Dinobot arc, where you set up, kind of similar to the Jetfire thing, the idea of here's someone who's on the enemy side, who realizes that he actually kind of has more in common with the more honorable good side, in this case the Maximals, and slowly through communicating with the Maximals some more, realizes the sort of path that he needs to take and has this kind of honorable sort of last stand, is killed fighting for what's right, and then helps to guide the kind of heroes to the victory. Cool. It's just that, again, it was so quick, we kind of brushed past it so quickly, and I didn't really feel like that Optimus Primal's arc of what they tried to do towards the end worked all that well. Again, because it was so cramped, you're trying to do Optimus Prime's arc, and then you're putting Optimus Primal into play here as well, and he's also meant to be like a leader type character, and they're just barely doing enough to kind of keep him on that level. To the point where, like, okay, he comes into the chamber at the end, and it's basically to have all the fights get interrupted, like, oh, Beast Wars Megatron interrupts this fight, but Optimus Primal interrupts this fight, and it's just like everyone is everywhere, and there's so much happening. So that's all fine. The Megatron Nemesis fight I actually thought was kind of decent. There's some weird setup of like they get to the temple basically, and Nemesis is blocking their path, and Bumblebee is just like, oh, like there's a trench in front of you. There's only you could make something like that, Optimus. And then Optimus is like, yes, someone like me, Nemesis. And I'm like, wait, how does Optimus have the ability to make a giant trench like that? Like, what? I was just kind of like, when have we seen Optimus do something that powerful? I missed it. But anyway, and then again, like you had stuff like a lot of like the support arcs here of like, you had kind of some weird moments. Like I just want to mention this here just because like I didn't get it really at all. I didn't particularly get the connection they were making. There's a moment where I think the Allspark visions that everyone was getting was something that like everyone was seeing someone that was like important to them or that they cared about. And then they randomly cut to RC, who sees Cog for some reason. And now I understand that like in the first 2 seasons, like Cog and RC was just sort of like part of the sort of Autobot strike team. I never particularly connected the dots that there was a closeness as such between the two of them. Again, speaks to the lack of development on a lot of the side characters, but that's where we are. I liked getting to sort of see the visuals of like Ultra Magnus again, and especially like Elita 1, which I suppose brings us into this kind of interesting decision that they made to kill her off, and effectively through the whole time travel thing, that because they went through the dead universe last season through a space bridge, they didn't just sort of spend a bit of time in the dead universe and then come out normally, and it's just the same amount of time has passed. They basically are saying that they full on, time traveled here. A lot more time than expected has passed. So when they return to Cybertron at the end, it's, a good while later, and so you see everyone has died effectively, including Elita, and so Optimus finds a dead Elita in the snow. That's how much time has passed. The planet is full on dead, and that's the threat at the end, is that the Allspark needs to quickly be brought back to Cybertron to sort of restore it. Again, I thought they did a decent job at establishing I want to word this correctly. The just character dynamic between Optimus and Elita. Did I interpret that in the first season as being romantic? Not especially, but I could have seen how you maybe got there. I did find it a little weird that they went straight to, the spirit of her saying that she loves Optimus. I get it that she died. She's seeing Optimus kind of return to the planet and kind of sort of fulfill his destiny in a way. She's always believed in him. It works to a certain degree, but I thought it was not a particularly great thing to do, to basically it felt very much like that sort of trope of like killing off this character just to give a sort of emotional moment to Optimus, when Elita was probably one of the most sort of universal, like everyone agreed she's probably one of the best like written and voice acted characters in the first 2 seasons, and then she's just dead and used as a ghost to help Optimus this season. It was not really ideal, I think. And again, a lot of these things are just like, when they happened, I wasn't like upset when they happened, because I just accept that this show was flawed from the get-go, trying to accomplish a full season's worth of content in 6 episodes, trying to do 3 whole seasons of content in 18 episodes. We were going into something that was doomed to fail, and especially doomed to fail when they chose to have such wide and broad scope with everything that they did. Like I said, every single concept of Transformers was brought up here at some point, effectively. I'm surprised we didn't see like combiners or anything like that. We did get to see the Arc transform, and that was kind of cool. Though I think Voltron kind of did this general dynamic a little bit better. But still, it was a cool moment when it happened, even though it lasted just, again, it happened, and then you almost forget that it happened because the ship transforming doesn't really mean all that much in the grand scheme of things. Because all that scene was to do was to have the ship push back the Nemesis. And that's it. Just over and over again. So after everything, Optimus has his moment. Megatron, after being sort of convinced by everyone to save sort of the present, save this timeline and not go off with Nemesis and Galvatron. Effectively, we just have this sort of peace. They just agree to the war's over now. The Decepticons are going to go their separate ways. The Autobots are going to do their thing. They have a sort of monument in the middle, which is sort of showing off both sides. And that's it. With, again, Starscream still sort of, raving, but we know it's true. That Unicron is still out there, is still speaking to him, is still planning something. That, the all-spark spirits together sent Nemesis and Galvatron away, but they're still threats, basically. I don't know. I didn't think it worked that well because the solution at the end of this all was what? It's that they ultimately just agree to stop fighting because the planet is at risk, that the war has damaged the planet so much effectively that they're going to work together to build it. And it took all of this for us to sort of get to this point. And it's like, okay, we've sort of helped to restore Cybertron. The Allspark is back. Great. Happy ending. Kind of, except, everyone who was left on the planet had died, basically. And this is all of the Transformers that are left. But now we have some Predacons and Maximals in here as well. I don't know. It's just, like I said, everything was thrown at the wall here, and you needed to be more focused here, to not touch on as many of these topics, and this, again, what I'd say is that, like, these 18 episodes, you probably needed to just cover the content of Siege within 18 episodes, so trying to do this and a journey through space, and then a arrive on Earth and meet Beast Transformers, it was just way too much. Start to finish, way too much. So, yeah, War for Cybertron Trilogy, I watched it, it was enjoyable, but the thing is, like, when you say something's enjoyable, that doesn't immediately mean it's like 10, 9, 8 out of 10. It's just that it wasn't bad. But, and there was enough just stuff that was all over the place that to me, I'm like, overall, I think the rating for pretty much all of these seasons and the show overall is just like it's a 6 out of 10. It's average, middle of the road. That some of the cool ideas that they brought up just never got executed all that well. That coming out of this, do I feel any character from War for Cybertron Trilogy stands out as a particularly strong or amazing iteration of that character? And I'm kind of like Elita for the first 2 seasons. I guess you could say Dinobot, but I think most people would agree the Beast Wars arc with Dinobot was better than the kind of really quick version of it here. They got to something with Starscream like right at the end. Jetfire's arc at the start was decent, but again, he was not a focus after that. And that's just this show all over. It's just that you go through, and there are so many characters in this show, but how many of them actually had a proper arc? And it's like, Optimus, yes, but this was probably one of the weakest Optimuses we've ever seen in a series. because they constantly just placed him in this position where, like, he's respected, but because of this one decision he made, everyone questions him, and that is just the doubt. This is Optimus Doubtimus is basically the approach that they took here, and the arc to fix that kind of worked. The Megatron arc, again, I thought the convincing scene at the end felt very rushed, that like, we're at the end, we don't want to commit to making Megatron even more of a villain, so let's have him make a reasonable decision for once. I didn't really feel like it addressed a lot of the bad stuff that he'd done before, like really killing Ultra Magnus and all this stuff. So it just felt like very hand-wavy, brush aside, none of this really matters, because they never told us what the war was over really in the first place. And because you've gone so far with the time travel and stuff like that, that all that's gone. The entire society, everyone else on Cybertron is gone. So the war only exists between these handful of characters here fighting on each side. The society issues that caused the war are gone. So I guess in that sense it makes sense that it would end just with the kind of personal feud between Optimus and Megatron coming to an end. But, you know, we only learned about it a handful of episodes ago because it's been so few episodes in the entire series. So, yeah, they just missed the mark, I think, from the very start of this series by not showing you a bit of an origin story for Optimus, showing Orion Pax, who he was before, showing Megatron before he was the Gladiator, before he was the leader of the Decepticons. Show us, you know, what he was fighting for, and that's the problem here, is that I think they relied far too much on just a general, like, you guys know what Transformers is about, you know what this concept is, we don't need to explain it that much, we'll just use it here and assume that you know exactly what we mean by it. That was so much what I felt that all three of these seasons were about. Of like, here's the Quintessons in season 2, you know what they're about, don't you? Yes, we're just going to do this really quick thing with them and go away. Oh, this new mercenary faction, we've been talking about that for the last few years. Here we go, you know what this is. The same with the Beasts here. I did ultimately feel that as much as they were slightly better characters, this was very much like, you guys know the Beast Wars guys, don't you? Wait, no you don't. What? You want us to characterize them? Oh, okay. Well, here's the same arcs, just not done as well. And it's frustrating. Like I said, for me, Transformers Prime or Transformers Animated is probably some of my favorite stuff, but ultimately the comics are probably where the fiction of Transformers has been done the best. I'm interested to see what they do on the new Nickelodeon show, because I think they have some of the writing team from this series on that, and we'll see where they go with it. A lot depends on visually how they do it, and then I really hope that they don't go too far down the kids path like they have before with like Robots in Disguise 2015 and stuff like that. I'd want to see the tone. I think Transformers Prime's tone I thought was quite nice. If you want to do more of a one like this, I guess tonally this is fine, but you need to do more character and plot work than you have here. And I'm guessing whatever show you do on Nickelodeon will at very least have a higher episode count. So that should fix things. But because it's on Nickelodeon, there's then the fear that, are they going to be plot focused at all? So, you know, it's always just this thing with Transformers of like, the stars have to align perfectly for us to get something that works on all the positives that you would want out of a piece of media. So, yeah, there are my thoughts on Transformers War for Cybertron Kingdom. If they do come back and do like a Unicron season or a Unicron movie or whatever, I don't think they will because they're moving on to something else. I will review that, but for now I guess this is going to be the last Transformers video until we maybe see more of that Nickelodeon show. So let me know in the comments what your thoughts were on Kingdom, the Siege, Earthrise, Kingdom trilogy overall, what I had to say about it, but that has been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.